Today, we are all well aware of the hegemonic power of Hungary. Their large size, economic stability, and military prowess has turned them into the hegemonic power of Europe. With their large sphere, they dominate a large portion of the continent and have been the forerunners in space exploration, artificial intelligence, and hybridization, with President Orban himself even visiting the moon, despite the Chinese and Americans claiming that this picture is fake. All this fortune came due to one man, Lajos Kossuth, who was the man who led Hungary into victory in 1848, defeating the Habsburgs, who without Russian support collapsed, allowing Hungary to not only gain its independence but also gain their own sphere in Bohemia while annexing Dalmatia. After this, Hungary would take advantage of a crumbling Ottoman Empire, reaching all the way to Constantinople and liberating the Balkans. Then, following the end of both world wars, Hungary stood as the sole superpower in all of Europe, becoming the first democratic state and the forerunners of industrialization. Now, what I want to do here is imagine a timeline where Hungary lost in 1848 and see how things will go from there. Now, I know that this will be very unrealistic and will be one of my most unrealistic videos to date, but please bear with me and enjoy the video. Make sure to subscribe, as only 5% of you are subscribed. Please increase that number as it would help the channel and would make my day. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below, but without any further ado, let's start this mostly unrealistic scenario. Now, here we will start at 1848. The causes for the War of Independence will mostly be the same. Influential Hungarian leaders like Lajos Kossuth, Sándor Petőfi, and Mihály Tancsis would start demanding more representation from the Habsburgs in Vienna. This would be due to the famines across Europe as a result of the Napoleonic Wars, forcing rural folk to migrate to the cities, exposing them to radical new ideologies. With nationalism becoming popular amongst the Hungarians or Magyars, many would start dreaming of political rights in the Habsburg Empire or even full independence. This rising tide of nationalism would be the reason the prominent Hungarian leaders would send their demands to Vienna. Initially, the Habsburgs would agree, with Emperor Ferdinand V signing the April Laws. This granted Hungary extreme amounts of autonomy. The Hungarians would use this to establish a parliament, abolish serfdom, and guarantee freedom of the press. Afterwards, prominent Hungarian leaders like Lajos Kossuth would start demanding full separation from the Habsburg Empire. Then, after several protests across the empire as part of the broader 1848 revolutions, Emperor Ferdinand would be removed from power. In his place, his grandson, Franz Joseph I, would become the new emperor. He would start revoking all the previous liberal reforms that his grandfather had made, as he was a staunch conservative. This would include demanding an end to the Hungarian autonomy. This would result in Hungary being antagonized, and Lajos would officially declare the independence of Hungary from the Austrian realm. Starting our scenario. At the start, Hungary, under prominent generals like Artur Gurgi and Joseph Bem, would achieve great victories. This we will do on purpose, as seeing the Habsburgs on the brink of collapse, someone would intervene to save them and save the old conservative order of Europe. Someone like, let's say, Russia? Here, Russia would interfere to save the Habsburgs, with 200,000 Russian soldiers descending into the Carpathian Basin. This would result in the tide turning, as now Hungary would be on the defensive. They would manage to hold out for a bit long, but eventually the Hungarians would lose. By the end, Hungary would be placed under martial law, with Croatia and Transylvania being stripped from them. All of their previous privileges would also be stripped from them by Emperor Franz Joseph. Kossuth and some Hungarian leaders would flee to the United States of America, while all the others would be arrested. 13 famous Hungarian leaders would be arrested and would be executed, with them becoming known as the Martyrs of Arad. In their place, Alexander von Bach would become the new governor of Hungary and would oversee a reign of terror, cracking down on any and all liberal movements as more and more discontent grows. An era that in our timeline saw Hungary rapidly industrialize would here see them go backwards, with the Hungarians looking for any and all opportunities to end the martial law and to be free of the Austrian yoke. Now, even though the revolutions of 1848 here mostly failed, that doesn't mean nationalism will die. Instead, it will become even more powerful in places like the Italian Peninsula and German Confederation, which would have many people wishing for their nation to unite. I predict that sometime around the late 1850s, this would result in Sardinia Piedmont, with French help of course, going to war with Austria and beating them, gaining Lombardy and severely weakening the Austrian Empire, though the Hungarians would not strike yet as they would be too weak. Then, after a few years, I predict that Prussia, to achieve their ultimate goal of German unification, would drag the Austrians in a war against Denmark and then declare war on them, mopping the floor with them. This would be the exact situation the Magyars wanted, and I predict that in the late 1860s, they would manage to force the Austrian monarch Franz Joseph to some sort of great compromise, where Hungary would be united with Austria but would be pretty much independent. I would probably name this fictional and unrealistic empire as Austria-Hungary. You would be asking, why did Franz Joseph just concede here when he didn't in the past? Well, this would be due to his wife, Elizabeth, also known as Sisi. Here, much like in our own timeline, she would greatly admire the Hungarian people and their culture, recognizing them as God's chosen people. She would also learn Hungarian, even teaching it to her child. She would manage to steer the emperor's mind to the right side of history and towards the Hungarians' favor. Hungary, under this new system, would see rapid economic progress, but it would still be nothing compared to our own timeline. Budapest would become a thriving economic and cultural center, with some famous landmarks like the Széchenyi Bridge being constructed here. The state would also see infrastructure development and rapid industrialization. Now, due to all of this, the Magyars would get extremely cocky and would decide to do something about all the other ethnicities in their empire. Here, this would birth a program we would call Magyarization. In it, Hungary would aim to culturally assimilate its ethnic minorities and limit the use of their language and culture in everyday life, and instead convert them into full-blooded, living, breathing Hungarians. Something which would bring them a lot of scrutiny from Western countries like the United States of America and the United Kingdom. Also around this time, I predict that the Turks and Russians will again go to war, with Russia this time mopping the floor with the Ottomans. In the aftermath, I do believe Austria-Hungary will gain some land, say Bosnia. Bosnia would be jointly ruled by both Austria and Hungary, but this would soon cause problems. In the rest of Europe, things would get worse between all the great powers, especially after the ascension of some foolhardy emperors in Germany or Russia. This might result in a few close calls, but I ultimately predict that some great war would start, and it would probably be caused by some damn foolish thing in the Balkans. I predict, and take this with a huge grain of salt, one day the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire would visit Bosnia to inspect the troops in the region, and along the way he might get assassinated by some cheeky Bosnian Serb, finally lighting the powder keg known as Europe. In the aftermath, I predict that Austria-Hungary would enact its revenge on the puny country of Serbia. This would trigger all the alliances. Russia would declare war on Austria-Hungary to protect Serbia, while Germany would declare war on Russia, protecting Austria-Hungary. Since France would be allied to Russia, Germany would also declare war on them, going through Belgium to attack France. This would drag in Britain, starting a conflict known as the Great War. This war would bring immense suffering to Hungary, with over 1 million Hungarians becoming victims of this war. I predict that Franz Joseph would probably die by now, and whoever will replace him will be a less effective ruler than he was. The war would probably result in massive food shortages, and Hungary, a land that was known for its massive agricultural output, would face huge famines. This would result in the people getting radicalized, much to the aristocracy's fear. I predict that Austria-Hungary by this time would most likely collapse, with a democratic republic being formed under Count Mihai Karoli. The war by this time would most likely end, and the great powers would start carving up Hungary. I predict that the vicious Entente would mutilate Hungary and take away important historical and rightful Hungarian lands like Nitra, Croatia, Vojvodina, and most importantly, Transylvania. This would become the most traumatic event in Hungary's history. In response to this, the people would look to the communists to reverse this. I predict that sometime in 1919, the communists, under some idiot, take power and coup the government. Their main goal would be only one thing and one thing only: regaining all rightful historical Hungarian lands. For this goal, I predict that they try to invade one of their neighbors, but then another joins in and the Hungarians lose either way. Romania might reach all the way to Budapest, sacking the city, turning the political situation in Hungary into a complete dumpster fire. The communists probably retreat to Russia, who might also become communist by this time. In Hungary, the West would probably intervene and install some new government under some admiral without a navy who would be ruling over a kingdom without a king. They signed the peace treaty, thus sealing Hungary's fate, and in the aftermath, what would be left would be a sad, impoverished rump state. This state would probably see economic turmoil, as most of Hungary's industry was located in now lost land. Whoever takes over the country would probably not do much about this, leading to a lot of resentment brewing in the people, especially for Trianon and those that had condemned them to this low-life existence and taken away all their prestige, leading to them becoming more and more radical and nationalistic. Also around this time, I predict that Germany would be going through the same thing, and much like Russia, would look towards a radical new ideology. But it wouldn't be communism, but it would probably be something more nationalistic. As a result, I predict that Germany starts remilitarizing and expanding with the goal of retaking their lost lands and restoring their pride. They would probably look towards Hungary as an ally and would bribe them with land to join their faction, something which would win the hearts and minds of the Hungarians. Germany might just start another world war, defeating France and then invading Russia or whatever it would be called here. Hungary would most likely join them in this and regain some lost land, but ultimately it would all be in vain, as I predict Germany starts losing, leading to Hungary soon falling under communist Russian hands, who would remove the old regime. The war would soon end, and Hungary would now probably be under the Russian thumb. The Russians would probably put the communists in charge, and they, being as retarded as they were, would probably make horrible decisions, leading Hungary down into its second authoritarian dark age. The communists might neglect the agricultural sector, which would result in Hungary, a land which had the second most fertile land in all of Europe, to face food shortages. All of this unrest would probably soon result in some sort of revolution to overthrow the extreme communist regime. I think it would probably be successful, but only for a little while, as the Russians, thinking the loss of Hungary would embolden their other satellite states, would immediately invade the nation. They would ultimately be successful, but I do think whoever they would put in power would be more moderate and less crazy than the previous guy. Thus, I do think that Hungary would slowly progress under this new leader and would be one of the more freer countries under communism. But ultimately, all things must come to an end, and so would communism. I predict that the Russians would ditch communism, leading to their satellite states to break free. Hungary would be included in this, and their transition into a democracy would probably be easy, at least compared to their neighbors. As we reach the modern day, I predict that Hungary would still have its fair share of issues and problems, but it would slowly work on them and would improve itself in the decades to come, working towards peace and prosperity. But this is where I'll end the scenario. If you sticked around till the end, then congratulations, you guys have been fooled. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and please subscribe. But for now, this was Alternate History Chronicles, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.